Well, what I would like to talk about is what came to me this time is the notion that Bhagavan is taking care of us. Because to me, that's a really good distinction between merely a philosophy and something more akin, or perhaps actually is a religion. So I never understood devotion until I read Muruganar. Then I never understood it until I read Muruganar. So that to me, now I feel Bhagavan is taking care of me. It's a bit metaphorical, but Bhagavan is taking care of me, certainly. And that to me is something religious people
it's
say.
more than metaphorical. It is very, very literal.
Yes, but I mean, the words don't quite fit, is how I feel. I guess because it's dualistic or something.
It fits very well in Bhagavan's teachings. Because we all start from duality. Bhagavan begins Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, the basis of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. He begins, the opening words of the first verse of the main text is Nam Ullahum Kandalal, because we see the world. You've got duality straight away, we and the world, and seeing. So we all start from duality. If there was not the appearance of duality isn't real, but it seems to be the case. If it wasn't for the appearance of duality, there would be no problem, and therefore no need for Advaita teachings.
Well, I like when someone put to him that he was expressing duality when he wrote hymns to Arunachala. He said something like, the writer and what is being written and what is being written about is all oneself.
Yes, yes. Bhagavan wrote love poems to himself, you can say. Or Arunachala wrote love poems to himself, whichever way you want to put it.
On the subject of Arunachala, you've described the benefit philosophically of Arunachala better than anyone I've personally heard talk about it, which is, you said, Arunachala is an embodiment of stillness and silence. And I think that's sort of the most charitable, rational way of describing our love for Arunachala.
Yes. That is, if we want to understand the significance, why among all the different names and forms of God, why was this the particular form that appealed to Bhagavan? Because the very name, Arunachala, Chala means movement, Achala means unmoving. What is unmoving? Only that which is. So Arunachala is the very embodiment of Sat and Chit, because Sat and Chit are one and the same. And of course Ananda, because that's also the same. And of course love, because that's also the same. Bhagavan says, he describes Arunachala, Amburu Varunachala, Arunachala, the form of love.
I love that. In email, I mentioned to you that I found ātma-svarupa a better description of oneself than saying, or possibly a better description than saying I am, or oneself, or the self, which you don't like to say the self. But
yeah.
And why is because you can never, when people say what is, or you can never mistake, or I am, you can never mistake ātma-svarupa for something other than Bhagavan himself, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Atma-svarupa literally means, svarupa means own form, very literally, but it implies the nature, the actual nature, real nature. Atma-svarupa is the real nature of oneself. So to put it in very simple terms, it is ourself as we actually are.
And that is noumenal or spiritual, not physical.
Not physical, no, no. For physical appears and disappears, so it cannot be what we actually are. Whatever appears and disappears cannot be real.
When the Buddha attained enlightenment, supposedly what he said was, what he learned was that all that arises passes away, this I know, or something like that.
Yes, yes.
I had just
but
had
in whose view do things arise and pass away?
Ego?
Ego, yes. And what is the reality of ego?
Oneself.
I am, yes.
I just had a brief email exchange with an ISKCON Krishna Bhakta, and he was saying, I didn't know there was such disagreement between the two traditions, but he was saying that Bhagavan and other Advaitins are māyāvādis, and that he said to say that God is everything or one is God is equivalent to saying one is an atheist, that there isn't really a God, because, do you follow that? What do you say about that?
That is very many. India is ancient India was a hotbed of philosophy. There are so many philosophies. Generally, they're classified into 12 systems. 6 of them are Nastika and 6 are Astika. And among Astika means, the Astika ones are those that accept the authority of the Vedas. Nastika don't accept the authority of the Vedas. That's the difference between them. But among the Astika philosophies, one is Vedanta. But within Vedanta, there are very, very different views, because Vedanta is what is based on the Prasthanatraya of Vedanta is the oldest texts of the Upanishads. Their philosophy was summarized in aphoristic form as the Brahma Sutras, and it was expressed in a way to apply to a wide section of, to all types of people. It was expressed beautifully in Bhagavad Gita. So these 3 sets of texts of a Prasthanatraya of Vedanta, these can be and have been interpreted in wildly different ways. Shankara, about 1300 years or so ago, came and arguing with other schools of philosophy, not only other Vedanta schools, also all the other schools. He established Advaita firstly, it's the correct interpretation of Vedanta. That's the true import of the Vedas, but that is even if you don't accept the Vedas, it's the correct experience based on a rational analysis and investigation of our own experience. After Shankara, a couple of hundred years or so after Shankara, Ramanuja gave quite a different interpretation. He gave a viśiṣṭādvaita interpretation. Viśiṣṭādvaita it's often translated as qualified non-dualism. It is a dualistic system, but it's not a radically dualistic system. It's a sort of compromise between non-duality and duality. That's not doing justice to it. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's just a rough idea. After some time after Ramanuja, Madhvacharya came, and he gave a dvaita, a dualistic interpretation. God and souls are absolutely different. But these are the 3 main ones. There are also, even predating the Advaita interpretation, Shankara didn't start the Advaita interpretation, it was there before, but Shankara systemized it, you can say. In a way, his contribution to Advaita is huge. Before he established Advaita, one of the most popular forms of Advaita was what was called bhēdābhēda. One of the most popular interpretations of Vedanta, what was called bhēdābhēda Vedanta. That is difference in non-difference, and non-difference in difference. Bheda means different, abheda means non-difference. So viśiṣṭādvaita is somewhat akin to bhēdābhēda. But somehow bhēdābhēda has largely been, it's not really a separate school of thought in the present day. But after Madhvacharya giving his Dvaita interpretation, came Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Bengal, and he gave he gave his own interpretation. His form of Vedanta is called Gaudiya Vaishnavism. He basically took elements of Madhvacharya's view and of Ramanuja's view, that is Dvaita and viśiṣṭādvaita, and he made his own version, his own interpretation of it. He, in many ways, it is very similar to viśiṣṭādvaita, and it has strong elements of bhēdābhēda also in it. And but whereas in viśiṣṭādvaita, they say the supreme God is Vishnu. He gave more importance to Krishna. That is, Krishna is a manifestation, an incarnation of Vishnu, but for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, Krishna is the Supreme Lord. So definitely all these other forms of Vedanta, they all love to attack Advaita. viśiṣṭādvaita attacks Advaita, Dvaita attacks Advaita. Well, Dvaita attacks both viśiṣṭādvaita and Advaita, and Gaudiya will also attack Advaita. These are different philosophical views regarding, and one of the that ISKCON person you told me about, you mentioned that he talked about what they call achintya bhēdābhēda tattva. That is the principle of inconceivable difference and non-difference. That is, we are not entirely the same as God, but we are not entirely different from God. So it's a bit like viśiṣṭādvaita. And it's also a bit similar to the Eastern Orthodox Christianity, which is dualistic, but not radically dualistic. Regarding Bhagavan, they will all the other schools of Vedanta, they call Shankara, and anyone who follows Shankara or Advaita, they call them māyāvādins. That is, those who contend Maya. Vada is a contention, but what the contention that you support by argument. So they call Advaita as māyāvāda. So that's why that person referred to Bhagavan as a māyāvādi. Bhagavan said about māyāvāda, those who call Shankara, that is, it is incorrect to call Shankara a māyāvādin, because Shankara says Maya is not real. Maya doesn't exist. Whereas all the others, they say Maya is real. Yes, this world actually exists. So Bhagavan said, they are the māyāvādins, we are not the māyāvādins. Bhagavan, I think it's, well, Bhagavan often used to say this whenever it was mentioned that Shankara is a māyāvāda, Bhagavan said, you don't call an atheist an Ishvaravādin, one who contends there's God. Yeah, so an atheist is one who says there's no God. So one who says Maya is unreal, there is no Maya, cannot be called a māyāvādin. But they call Advaita māyāvāda because Advaita says all this is Maya. What is real is only Brahman. But even Maya is not other than Brahman. But they will attack Advaita in many other ways. So definitely they will paint Bhagavan with the same brush as they paint any other Advaitin, Shankara or Gaudapada or any other Advaitin. Bhagavan is, for them, they all belong to the same set.
I was surprised that was the first thing out of his mouth. He's like, Ramana was a māyāvādi. It's like, okay, well, I guess you understand him then, one word.
Well, that shows a misunderstanding, a complete misunderstanding. Bhagavan said, Maya, Bhagavan gave a very nice interpretation of Maya. He said, Maya is ya-ma. Ya is a feminine form of what? So she who, ma means not, doesn't exist. So she who doesn't exist is Maya. What is not is Maya. So how can you call someone who says that Maya is non-existent a māyāvādi?
The other thing he was saying.
But one other thing I wanted to say on this, regarding that is, all these schools of thought will attack Advaita. And because of the need of the time, Shankara opposed other schools of philosophy because he had a mission to establish Advaita as on a rational and also on a scriptural basis, as this is the correct interpretation of Vedanta, and this is correct interpretation of our experience. But that doesn't mean all Advaitins have to go out arguing with others. In fact, it goes. Shankara was an exception, but generally it goes against the spirit of Advaita to attack other schools. Why? Because, and Shankara also pointed this out, but the Advaita view is all other schools are correct at their own level. That is, we are on a course of, we are all undergoing a course of spiritual development. From the worst sinner to the greatest saint, all are on a journey, all are on a spiritual journey. So at different levels of spiritual development, different teachings are appropriate. If you teach the highest Advaitic teachings as the only option, everyone's going to become materialist. But if the only alternative to materialism is radical Advaita as taught by Bhagavan, most people end up materialist. So obviously there's a whole range of views between these. And also for spiritual practice, Dvaita is very appropriate for most people. But through Dvaita, we slowly progress and we gradually begin to accept a more viśiṣṭādvaita approach. But eventually, the ultimate truth is Advaita. So Advaita actually has no argument with any other school. When other schools attack Advaita, we can give reasonable arguments. Like when they say, like that ISKCON person said to you, but Advaita is incoherent. It's incoherent in their view because they don't actually, they're not ready to argue with Advaita on its own terms. If they were ready to argue with Advaita on its own terms, it is anything but, particularly as taught by Bhagavan, it's anything but incoherent, it's extremely coherent. But because they don't like the premises, they prefer to dismiss the whole thing as an incoherent system. That's fine. At their level, it's entirely appropriate. We've got no argument with them. Namaskaram to them. I mean, it's not a problem for us. Bhagavan made this very, very clear in Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. That is, the first 3 verses of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, it's very important to understand what Bhagavan is saying in these first 3 verses. That's the first 3 verses of the main text. That is what he says in verse 1. He begins, because we see the world. That is, what is the problem? The problem is because we see the world. If we didn't see any world, in sleep we don't see any world, there's no problem. In waking and dream we see a world and there are problems. So all spiritual teachings become necessary only because we see a world. But Bhagavan then draws an inference from this. Because we see the world, accepting one fundamental that has a power that becomes many is certainly the one best option. That is, now there is, we who see the world are one. The world is multiple, manifold phenomena. So there's the one seeing the many. So how do we explain this appearance of many? The simplest explanation is that the seer is seeing itself as the many. That is, ego sees itself as the world. The dreamer sees it, the dreaming mind sees itself as the dream world. This is the simplest explanation. So, and everything resolved back to one dreamer, what is the reality of that one dreamer? That is the one fundamental that Bhagavan refers to here. So he says, accepting one fundamental that has a power to become many is certainly the one best option. Why is it best option? According to the principle of parsimony, Occam's razor, the simplest explanation, the explanation that involves that postulates the the fewest number of entities is most likely to be the correct explanation. That is, a simple explanation is always more likely to be correct than a complex explanation, because a complex explanation postulates so many things. So if any of those things are wrong, the whole system falls down. So a simple explanation is always a more robust explanation. So Bhagavan says it is certainly the one best option. In most translations, this is the term he uses here, Arunachala, which I interpret as the one best option. Most people interpret it, but that is certain or something. But I don't think that's what Bhagavan means here, because the very next verse, he mentions alternative views. So this isn't the only option. There are other options. I mean, there are so many different systems of philosophy in India and the whole world, and so many religions, so many things. So there are so many options, but among all options, Bhagavan says this is the best one. And then if you accept this option, then what do you have to conclude? The picture of names and forms, the one who sees, the cohesive screen, and the pervading light, all these are he who is oneself. He refers to that one fundamental that he referred to in the first sentence. And he says, what is that one fundamental? Tanam, who is oneself. So all these the whole appearance, not only the picture, but also the one who sees the picture, the screen on which it's seen, and the light by which it's seen, all these are that one principle, and that is oneself. That is what we actually are. So Bhagavan, he lays the foundation for Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. But then what is the message of the next two verses is very, very important, because in the next two verses, Bhagavan points out what he's going to reveal to us in Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu is for our own spiritual benefit. It has one aim and one aim alone, to enable us to eradicate ego. Why we study Advaita philosophy is because it's a practical philosophy. It helps us to know what we have to investigate in order to know the truth, to know the reality, and thereby be free from what is unreal. So that is the purpose. Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu is an extremely practical text. So in the next two verses, it's in the fourth verse that Bhagavan really begins his exposition, but in verses 2 and 3, he's pointing out to us in very, very simple way, this is not for argument. So he says, each mata, each viewpoint. This is talking about the different Indian systems of philosophy or different Indian religious traditions. They all begin by postulating three fundamentals. The three fundamentals he refers to here, as he specified in the Kaliveṇbā form, is God, world, and soul. That is all religions assume that there's a God, there's a world, and there's a soul. Okay, some religions like Buddhism and Jainism and certain forms of Hinduism don't postulate a God, but they have some sort of idea of something that lies beyond the world and the soul. That is, the world is what is seen, the soul is the one who sees, and there's some reality beyond this. If you're not a materialist, you'll accept some sort of reality beyond this. In Buddhism, they call it nirvana. I'm not sure what they call it in Jainism. And in some of the non-theistic systems of Hindu philosophy, that is among the Astika philosophies that are not all theistic, they talk about Purusa and Prakriti. Prakriti is all that is manifest. Purusa is we can say the equivalent of God. But it's interpreted. I mean, we go into Indian philosophy. There's innumerable views and innumerable arguments and everything. But basically, there is this acceptance. There are three things. There's the we who see, the world that is seen, and there's some reality beyond these two. So that is the a contention, but most, except materialists, all will accept this. So then he says, so he starts, as I say, he starts each religion or each philosophical system or non-materialistic system of philosophy initially accepts three fundamentals: the world, soul, and God. Contending only one fundamental stands as the three fundamentals, or the three fundamentals are always three fundamentals, is only so long as ego lasts. This is, here Bhagavan is talking about the argument between Advaita, that says all these three are only one, and or it's the one reality that appears as all these three, and other systems of Vedanta and many other systems of philosophy which say no, but these three, God, world, and soul, are always actually three. They can never become one, or they never are one. They're not one now, and they never will be one. So arguing these different points of views is possible only so long as ego exists. That it's only when we rise as ego, but we identify ourselves with one view. I am an Advaitin, therefore I contend everything is one. No, I am a Dvaitin, a dualist. I say everything, there are three different fundamentals. All this is only for the ego. Then Bhagavan, his conclusion to this verse is, destroying I, that means destroying ego, standing in the state of oneself is best. Standing in our own natural state, the state of just being as we actually are, that is best. And then in the next verse, he goes on in a similar way. These are all different philosophical viewpoints. Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, the world is real? No, it's an unreal appearance. The world is sentient? It is not. The world is happiness? It is not. What is the use of disputing like this? Bhagavan asks, that's the first sentence. Then he says, leaving the world and investigating oneself, one and two ceasing, that means the duality of the pair of opposites, duality and non-duality, in other words, the duality of duality and non-duality ceasing, that state in which I has perished is agreeable to all. Why is it agreeable to all? Even the Dvaitins who want to always remain separate from God. They don't want to become one with God. They want to always be worshipping God as something other. Even they find it very agreeable to fall asleep. So that is a state in which this ego isn't present, in which duality isn't present, but we all find that state agreeable. So why Bhagavan said this, why Bhagavan began Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, I mean, right at the beginning of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, before going on into the real nitty-gritty of what he's to explain, why he wrote two verses, basically pointing out that our aim is not to engage in dispute with others. Our aim is the eradication of ego. It is because it's very easy, once you learn a new system of philosophy, to become over-enthusiastic, and when you meet people who have other views, to get into arguments with them. That is quite against the spirit of Advaita as taught by Bhagavan. All other systems of all other viewpoints, all other systems of philosophy, they're appropriate for people at their level. Even the materialists, we've got no quarrel with the materialists or with the atheists or with anyone else. What they believe is appropriate for them. They will, so long as they are satisfied with that, with such a perspective, let them have that view. Sooner or later, whatever perspective, whatever view we have, we will become dissatisfied with it and we'll look for something deeper. now we have come to Bhagavan. Bhagavan is giving us the deepest view. But Bhagavan doesn't ask us to be satisfied with what he teaches in Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. The purpose of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu is pointing to something which is beyond words. That is the state of egolessness. As he said, the state in which I has perished is agreeable to all. And he concluded the previous verse, destroying I, standing in the real state of oneself is best. So this is the aim. This is what this is the aim of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. This is the aim of Bhagavan's teaching. So when we meet people who want to criticize Advaita or criticize Bhagavan's teaching, we've got no argument with them. For them, if they consider Bhagavan a māyāvāda, fine. That's let them worship Krishna or whoever they like to worship. That's fine. Ultimately, from our point of view, the Krishna they are worshipping is none other than our Bhagavan Ramana. So we have no quarrel with them. They love Krishna. We also love Krishna. Why not?
Regarding Arunachala, you have said that you've gone around the hill almost every day for 20 years, I believe. What was sort of the benefit of that, and how did you enjoy that, and so forth?
I just loved walking around the hill. I mean, I can't say I was doing it for any benefit. Really, I mean, I wasn't thinking in terms of benefit. Bhagavan has said it's good to do. I enjoy a walk, and I just love Arunachala because Bhagavan loved Arunachala, I love Arunachala. So it was just a very natural thing to do. Regarding benefit, Bhagavan has said, whether you believe it or not, if you touch fire, it's going to burn you. Like Bhagavan said this to, I think, to Uڵḷļadu or someone, because Uڵḷļadu was always asking his doubts. So when he asked Bhagavan, what's the use of going around the hill? Then Bhagavan said, whether you believe in it or not, just like fire will burn you whether you believe in it or not, if you go around this hill, whether you believe it or not, it will benefit you.
Did you think Natanananda was enlightened or self-realized, by the way?
I'm not in Bhagavan's teaching, judging whether such and such a person is enlightened or not enlightened. It's irrelevant. According to Bhagavan, when people discussed in Bhagavan's presence, is such and such a person enlightened or jnani or whatever, Bhagavan said, there is only one jnani. You are that.
Okay, I was just curious because I'd never heard someone say that, and you seem to indicate that the last time I heard you talk about him. Because I know you think Sadhu Om was self-realized, and in fact, I just heard you talking about it on an old audio. You said something like when he was going through rough times in his life is when you thought he had never said so, but you thought when he was going through rough times is when jnana dawned in his life or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he wouldn't say anything like that. But what we have come to Bhagavan for is to find out what we actually are. What we actually are is not a person. Only when we find what we actually are, we will know that we are not this person. So to talk about the problem is as Bhagavan said, because you take yourself to be a body, you take the jnani to be a body. So we take Sadhu Om, Murugana, Bhagavan, Natanananda, all these to be people. What is their inner state? Honestly, we can't judge. We can surmise. But from the way they live their life, from the clarity, from the love, and from the humility, from these things we can surmise. But it doesn't really matter who is a jnani. It's sufficient for us, we believe Bhagavan is a jnani. That is sufficient for us. About others, we really need not be bothered. Why it is important to believe that Bhagavan is a jnani? Because his whole teaching is based upon that. So, but even if we don't believe Bhagavan was jnani, what he says is very, very rational. So there is something we are not what we seem to be. We now take ourselves to be this body and mind. This cannot be what we actually are, because we're aware of ourselves, even in the absence of this body. In dream and sleep, this body is not, we're not aware of this body, but we're aware of ourselves. And this mind, which seems to be the same mind in waking and dream, but in sleep we exist and are aware of our existence without this mind. So we cannot be any of these things. We cannot be anything that is seen, any object of our perception. This body is something that we perceive. It's something, though we experience it as ourself, we also experience it as an object. And we also experience the mind as an object. All mind consists of what? Thoughts, feelings, desires, likes, dislikes, and so on. All these are objects. They're things that appear and disappear in our view. So the subject cannot be any object. And what we are is not even the subject, because the subject that sees all these objects is only ego. And this ego disappears in sleep. In the absence of objects, the subject also disappears. What then remains is the fundamental awareness I am, which is shiny even now. That is what we actually are. This is a very logical and rational and simple conclusion to come to. Having come to this conclusion, then all our problems are caused because we now experience, though the truth is that we are just I am I, as Bhagavan said, that is the truth. That's our only true identity. But we now mistake ourselves to be this body, and consequently we experience problems. So in order to be free of all our problems, we need to know ourselves as we actually are. So all these are very reasonable. So we don't even if you don't want to believe Bhagavan is jnani, doesn't matter. Bhagavan says, no, you are the jnani. Know yourself and you'll know the only jnani there is.
I've been thinking lately that Bhagavan's teachings are like heavy medicine, sort of like morphine or something when you're about to pass away. And I want to say that because like when I was younger, scientific data was extraordinarily important to me. So to hear you disregard the Big Bang with such ease is a slightly tweaking, but basically not at all, because I'm past all that now. And Ramana in talks says, you know, like whether the world is round or flat, it disappears in your sleep. What's the big deal? So, I mean, the point, like as a Western educated person, whatever, like these things are very important to us. But when you're really interested in realization and deep peace and happiness, all that stuff just kind of goes away. And what matters is Bhagavan, being at peace in our center. And so it's right in a way to dismiss all of it with such ease, because what matters is Bhagavan.
Yeah. During our terminal illness, when we're being given the morphine to bear with the pain, all the things that mattered to us up till that point in our life no longer matter. We are very happy in our morphine state. So with Bhagavan's teachings, as you say, it's like morphine. We are very happy. Let the world be as it is. We can't change the world.
I think there is actually a lot of good data and agreement for the Big Bang. I don't want to hark on this point, but as contrasted with, say, the fundamentalist Christian view that it was created in 7 days. But your point is, I mean, I think you would admit there's a big difference there, but your point is it's still looking outward, not looking within. And the real truth, the eternal truth, the abiding truth is Bhagavan himself, what our true nature, what we really are.
Yeah. But actually, from the Advaitic point of view, I can see from a certain perspective, yes, the Big Bang Theory does seem to be more reasonable. But if you believe that God created the world in 7 days, then you can interpret all the evidence to fit that. Like some of the Christian fundamentalists, they say, why all these fossils, these dinosaur fossils and things are there? Because God created the world in 7 days with all these fossils to test our faith in Genesis. If you believe Genesis is literal truth, then that's a perfectly reasonable, there's nothing unreasonable in that view. It depends what you take. whatever you believe, there are certain foundational beliefs on which other beliefs are built. So if your foundational belief is that the Bible is literally true, but Genesis is literally true, then you can interpret all the evidence according to that. Those who believe in the Big Bang, they have a foundational belief. This world exists independent of our perception of it. That foundational belief, they and the Christian fundamentalists, they will both agree on that. Yes, definitely the world exists there independent of my perception of it. But on what evidence is there that the world exists independent of our perception of it? There is no evidence and can be no evidence. There may seem to be evidence, but if we consider the evidence critically, there is absolutely no evidence, but what we are experiencing now is anything but a dream. Because everything that we experience now, we could equally well experience as a dream.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think for me personally, a simpler way of understanding that is when we say everything is a dream, it seems to me that if that got in the hands of the wrong person, that would be a really crazy making idea. But you say it just gives us peace to turn within. So that's good. But my view is just that it's a dream compared to the eternal stable reality. It's dreamlike because the eternal stable reality is what is real. There's nothing that compares to that because that's the only thing that is real. That's the only thing.
Yeah, people can interpret even devil quotes for Bible. That is, even the truest philosophy can be misinterpreted by those whose minds aren't yet pure enough.
Well, another thing that's interesting to me about Advaita.
But
go ahead,
why Bhagavan revealed all these things openly? He wasn't worried about whether people misinterpret it, because those who are not mature enough will not be attracted to this philosophy. So they'll just dismiss it, which is fine.
Well, wait, I actually disagree with that. I think you're right on the deeper level, but what I see, not real Bhagavan devotees at all, but like generally speaking, there's a whole movement, non-duality, and it's the most trivial, trite, shallow nonsense I've ever heard in my life. And that's part of why I said last time I don't like Advaita. I don't mean traditional Advaita per se. I really mean this nonsense popular level Advaita, which is just absurd.
Yeah. But I mean, those people haven't really been attracted to Bhagavan's teachings. They're just cherry picking a few ideas here and there. There is no ego. Bhagavan has said there's no ego. Then no problem at all. If there's no ego, then there's no problem. So we can live our life however we like. Who is the we who wants to live their life however they like? It is ego only. So it is extremely shallow, but if they're happy with that belief, fine, let them. Just like we have no quarrels with the dvaitins or the materialists or anyone, whatever other philosophies are there, that's fine. At their level, that's what satisfies them, that's fine.
Well, what bothers me about it is that it's the lowest level, because metaphorically speaking, like biblically, that's what made sort of Adam and Eve fall, and that's what sort of made Lucifer's fall or whatever, is the idea that you want to be God. And we are God in our real nature, but that isn't as an ego. That's the furthest thing from the truth, you know, and a lot of people will take it incorrectly, and they're actually at the farthest, lowest level possible.
Yes. But everyone is at their own level. So it's sooner or later, they will be dissatisfied with their trivial interpretation of Advaita, and they will look for something a little deeper. Until then, let them be happy with their trivial, superficial interpretation. That satisfies people.
I think some people who come to like Advaita or Zen, it's because like we were atheists and we no longer like religion. It doesn't work for us, but here's a way of being spiritual and finding peace without God.
Yeah. Well, if they found peace, very good. But have they actually found peace?
Yeah, exactly. And finding peace doesn't mean sort of finding peace. It means no longer being the self, no longer being a lowercase self, but an ego.
Yeah. The greatest blessing is dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction is the very nature of ego. So dissatisfaction will always drive us on to look for something deeper and deeper and deeper. We maybe seem to be superficially satisfied, but deep down we're never satisfied. So we as Bhagavan said, just like the birds flying in the sky, in verse 8 of Arunachala, just like the birds flying in the sky cannot find rest until they return to earth, no, these jivas, embodied souls, cannot find rest until they return to you, Arunachala, the source.
As far as Ramana being more like a religion, and a long time ago, you and I had a discussion about this. You like to think Bhagavan is just philosophy. And I think you can interpret it that way, but I think from an outside perspective, it's more reasonable to say, yeah, there is philosophy, but like if you were to actually go to the ashram, there's like chanting, there's giri pradakshina, there's this, that, and the other, and there is worship of Bhagavan, even though ultimately he's our real nature. So that all of that is more like akin to a religion. Would you like to comment on that?
It really doesn't matter what label we call it, whether we call it philosophy or call it religion. Why I prefer to view Bhagavan's teachings as philosophy is in religion generally, how religion is generally understood. Firstly, there are a set of beliefs, things you should believe, that you have to take on faith. And secondly, a religion is an identity. I am a Christian, I am a Muslim, I am a Catholic, I'm a Protestant, I'm an Orthodox, I'm a Vaishnavite, I'm a Shaivite, I'm a Kashmir Shaivite, I'm a Zen Buddhist, I'm a Theravadan Buddhist, I'm a Mahayana Buddhist, all this identity. True spirituality. Actually, I don't call Bhagavan teachings just philosophy. They're extremely philosophical, but they're also extremely practical. Bhagavan's teachings are spirituality more than religion. Spirituality, because spirituality gives room for the devotion. Even for worshipping name and form, there's room for that in spirituality. Whereas what there's not room for in true spirituality is identity. We come to the spiritual path in order to give up our identity, not in order to acquire a new identity. There's no conversion. I was a pagan and now I'm a born-again Christian, or I'm a whatever, I've become a Muslim, or I become a Buddhist, or whatever. There's no conversion.
Well, for me, it is sort of about the transformation of consciousness. And that's part of what drew me to Eastern Orthodoxy. Also, part of what drew me to that was interacting with you, because you put a lot of emphasis on humility. And reading those teachings, it made me think, oh, maybe I could learn some more humility through this, but actually it's better for me to be just with Bhagavan.
What is the enemy of humility? Identity. The truly humble person has no identity. Or at all, if we have an identity, as Bhagavan said, our true identity is I am I. Nan. That is the only true identity. So that is the identity of a humble person. So long as I think I am this or I am that, there's an abhimanam there. Abhimanam is the opposite of humility.
What's abhimanam?
Abhimanam, it's a very difficult word to adequately. It means attachment, it means identification. The nature of ego is abhimanam. Ego identifies itself as a form. I am this body.
On the subject of likes and dislikes, for whatever reason, I don't like the concept of likes and dislikes. I had a friend.
Bhagavan has said, you're following Bhagavan teaching. Bhagavan said, likes and dislikes are both to be disliked.
Well, I'm meaning I'm meaning the phrase though. When I was younger, I had a friend who said, you know, you like what you like and you dislike what you dislike. And I was like, you know, that makes a lot of sense. That's just sort of rational common sense. Because I was studying like Buddhism and other Asian philosophy at the time. You're supposed to not have likes and dislikes. She's like, you like what you like, you don't like what you don't like. I was like, yeah, you're right. But I think like a deeper, or what works for me better is maybe talking about attachment and aversion, which is the same thing you're saying, but for some reason it makes more sense to me.
The Sanskrit term for likes and dislikes is raga dvaita. Raga means passion, but it means passionate desire. It implies desire. Dvaita means aversion. So desire and aversion.
I see.
But actually, I think going by the English terms or the Tamil terms, Bhagavan used virapu, verapu. They are very literally translated into English as likes and dislikes. That is our will, the subtlest level of our will is vāsanās. Vāsanās means inclinations. Inclinations give rise to likes and that is the first manifestation of our inclinations is likes and dislikes. And they in turn give rise to desires and attachments and aversion and everything. That is, we desire the things we like. What are the things we like? The things we think will make us happy, we like, and so we desire them. So I think likes and dislikes, in a certain sense, we can view them as desires in a more subtle form. And another still way, more subtle form is just the vasana, the inclination.
In another way,
inclinations we have to be concerned about.
But in another way, though, I feel like I haven't chosen what I like and dislike. In another way, I haven't chosen what makes me happy and unhappy. Like if I try to choose to live a certain way, I haven't chosen what makes me happy. You know, I really haven't.
You, Sean, haven't chosen. Sean is a that is, you are now born as Sean because of your vasanas. So Sean cannot decide what the vasanas are. Sean is just, you are not Sean. That is, it is ego that has vasanas, has inclinations, has likes, dislikes, and desires and attachments and so on. But as ego, we are free either to follow our vasanas or to refrain from following them. If we follow them, we get carried away by them. If we refrain from following them by clinging to ourselves, we are thereby weakening our vasanas. So we are not bound by our vasanas. We are always free to choose whether to follow a vasana or not to follow it.
In another sense, aren't the vasanas not separate from I am?
Vasanas belong to ego. Ego is the false awareness, I am this person. That is the pure I am has no vasanas. It's only ego who has vasanas. And ego is that which always identifies itself as a person, as I am this body. Ego is not its vasanas, but it is the very nature of ego to have vasanas. And vasanas are the fuel that keep ego alive, or the army, we can say, the ego's army. What defends and protects ego is its vasanas. So long as we have strong inclination to go outwards, and so long as we yield to that inclination to go outwards, ego is safe. Ego is in danger only when we turn within, when we don't yield to the inclination to go outward, the viśiṣṭādvaita vasanas, but instead try to cling to I am, then ego is in mortal danger.
But really, there is no ego at the end of the day. Like it really is just the self. There's the rope, not the snake.
Yeah, but we need not bring in Uḷḷadu at this stage.
Exactly.
Yeah, Bhagavan began Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu with the word nam, we, because we see the world. Who is that we? It is ego. The whole of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, the whole of Bhagavan teaching is based on the fact, I mean, the root problem identified by Bhagavan is ego. Bhagavan has said ego doesn't actually exist, but he didn't say ego doesn't seem to exist. whatever appears and disappears doesn't actually exist, because what actually exists must always exist. As Bhagavan often used to say, if something exists at one time and not at another time, it doesn't exist even when it seems to exist. So whatever appears and disappears, whatever is not always existing and always shining, is cannot be real. It's only a seeming existence, and its shiny is only a seeming shining. So ego is only a seeming, it's only a seeming existence. But so long as ego seems to exist, everything else seems to exist. So that is the problem. So if you want to be free of trouble, we need to be free of ego. If we investigate ourselves, we will see there never was any such thing as ego, then all problems are solved. It's not even true to say all problems are solved. All problems are dissolved. That is not even dissolved. That is, it will be clear that there never were any problems, because there was never any ego experiencing those problems.
I agree with that.
That is the ultimate truth. That is Uḷḷadu. But that is not our experience now. There's no point. Uḷḷadu is very nice, but it doesn't solve our problem now. So Bhagavan gave us a practical solution. Uḷḷadu doesn't offer any solution because it says there's no problem. So the solution is offered only in viśiṣṭādvaita, or the best solution is offered in viśiṣṭādvaita. Yes, we see the world. Because we see the world, there are so many problems. So what's the solution? Don't see the world. But merely not, we don't see the world in sleep, we are free of problems. But we want to cease seeing the world permanently. In sleep, there are no problems. The only problem in sleep is that we come out of it again. So what is this thing that comes out of sleep and creates all these problems in waking and dream? That is ego. Investigate ego, and we'll see but what we actually are is just pure awareness, and there never was any ego. But saying there's no ego even before we've investigated it is simply deluding ourselves.
Completely. I have a question. Are thoughts predetermined?
Some, maybe. That is, this whole thing of, by default, all actions of mind, speech, and body are driven by our will, by our vāsanās, by default. However, there are certain actions of mind, speech, and body but are necessary in order for us to experience prarabdha. What is predetermined is only prarabdha. That's the fruits of our past karmas, but we are to experience in this lifetime. They are predetermined. In order for us to experience those fruits, there are certain actions that we need to do by mind, speech, and body. Those thoughts, words, and deeds are predetermined. But since we cannot distinguish which are predetermined and which aren't predetermined, and since many of the predetermined ones, in other words, many of the actions that are driven by our destiny or that are in accordance with our destiny are also being driven by our will. So it's best to consider all actions. We are responsible for all actions. So what is the solution? Don't act, don't think. How to stop thinking? Cling so firmly to to self-attentiveness, but we thereby give no room to the rising of any other thoughts. If instead you're trying to push away the thoughts, no, it's bad thinking. I have to chitta-vritti nirodha. I have to control these chitta-vrittis. It's just one chitta-vritti trying to control another chitta-vritti. Bhagavan says, what's it matter however many thoughts rise? As and when each thought arises, vigilantly investigate to whom does it arise? To me. Who am I? Back to the, not that we have to be asking the question, that's just those words are indicating the direction in which we should travel. That is, whatever appears, it appears to whom? To me. So we turn our attention back towards ourselves.
I was talking to a friend the other day and trying to describe my take on Ramana's teachings. He's a Ramana Bhakta. And I did end up spontaneously sort of saying at a lower level, so to speak, that Bhagavan did talk about the right side of the chest. And I said, that's not the ultimate truth, but there is this sort of right side of the chest thing in his teachings. And also, I said this to you a long time ago, but I don't think you ever actually responded to it. But even in a lot of photographs, you'll notice Bhagavan's looking to the right. And I can't help but think, is that him trying to say there's something to this right side of the chest on a relative level thing?
Bhagavan did say it's a simple fact. That Bhagavan pointed out very simple. It's no big deal, the fact that the heart is on the right-hand side. That is, as Bhagavan pointed out, if a schoolboy is asked, who will go and fetch the newspaper? He says, I'll go and get it. He doesn't point his legs and say, I'll run and get it. If he's asked, who can do the sum correctly? He doesn't point and say, I can do the sum correctly. He says, I can do it correctly. So when we refer to ourselves as this body, the point in the body, but we feel is the center of ourselves is here. We can also observe it. If you're walking down the street and suddenly a car comes behind you and honks its horn, and you get a shock, it's very obvious that any shock originates, that we feel a sensation 2 digits to the right from the center of the chest. That's a simple thing anyone can observe, but this is all relative to the body. Bhagavan's teaching is, I am not this body. So it's of no spiritual significance. It may be an interesting observation, but that's all it is. It's an objective observation.
I see.
And it's related to the body, which is not ourself.
I think a lot of what we're talking about when we say like things are unreal, they're definitely not true, all that stuff, what we're really saying is like, I mean, it needs to be clear that it's only in relation to Bhagavan, or the ultimate truth, which is completely stable. Like it's not even, you wouldn't even say it's completely stable. It's so obviously what is the case. There's no fluctuation whatsoever. Everything else by comparison to that is changing, fluctuating.
It's not only by comparison to that. What does the word real mean? What actually exists is real. What doesn't actually exist but seems to exist is unreal. If we go by that definition, all this is unreal.
And then in another sense, it's all Bhagavan.
Of course, there are for the sake of philosophical analysis, different levels of reality are distinguished. There's Paramartika Satya and there's Vyavaharika Satya. But Vyavaharika Satya is not Satya, it is Mithya. It is not reality, it is only seeming.
So you talked about this a little bit in one of your recent talks. I can't remember if it's Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, but he says the body and the universe are still what is, are still ātma-svarupa, but as ātma-svarupa, not as objective phenomena that we see with our mind or whatever.
Yes, that is in the 7th paragraph of Nana. Bhagavan says, Swarupa itself is God, Swarupa itself is I, meaning ego, Swarupa itself is the world. All is Shiva Swarupa.
You know, I agree with that. That's what I think is the truth.
But what does that mean when he says Swarupa is the world? He doesn't mean that the world is, it is Swarupa that appears as a world. It's Swarupa that appears as I. It's Swarupa that appears as God. What actually exists is only Swarupa.
But it's all Swarupa, so to speak. Yeah. It's just Swarupa.
Yes, it is just Swarupa, but the problem is Swarupa is one and indivisible. As Bhagavan says in verse 28 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, if one knows what one's nature is, then Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda. Anadi means beginningless. Ananta means endless, limitless, infinite. That way, without any kind of limit. Akhanda means unbroken, undivided. So that which is infinite and undivided cannot have parts. So there can be no, so long as we are seeing the many, we are not seeing ourselves as we actually are. That's why Bhagavan says in the 5th paragraph of Nana, when the world appears, he says, when the world appears, Swarupa does not appear, and when Swarupa appears, world does not appear. Yes, when Swarupa appears or shines, the world does not appear.
I was listening to...
So we are not seeing ourselves as we actually are, so long as we are seeing the world.
I was listening to a couple teachers the other day briefly, and they do say they mistake, I guess, what is, when we talk about what is, and they start to say that it's like the way things are in this situation in the moment, and that's what is. And that's why I think it's really important.
That is not what is. That is what seems to be.
Yes. And that's such a big misunderstanding. I think it's important.
When Bhagavan taught Uڵḷadu, it literally means just what is, what exists, but it implies what actually exists.
And that's why I was saying,
this world is not Uڵḷadu.
And that's why I was saying,
not Uڵḷadu. What actually is only that that pure awareness I am. Exactly.
And so awareness is what is.
Yes, awareness. Bhagavan says exactly that in verse 23 of Upadēśa Undiyār. Because of the non-existence of any other awareness to know what is itself is awareness. That is, there's no awareness other than what is to know what is. So what is only awareness. Because if there was any other awareness, if that awareness were other than what is, it would be a non-existent awareness. So it couldn't be aware of anything. And if what is were not aware, it wouldn't know its own existence. So there couldn't be any awareness at all.
That makes sense.
So the fact that we are aware, I am, shows that we are sat and chit. We are what is and what is aware. That's why he concludes verse 23 of Upadēśa Undiyār saying, Unave namai ullam. That is, awareness alone exists as we. That is, what we actually are is only awareness.
Would you say that the best translation of Guru Vachkakovai is yours and Om's?
I'm not entirely satisfied with it because it was the first work we started to translate together, but our translations later on were better than our earlier translation. But I mean, I think because I'm a perfectionist, when I translate things, I like to translate as perfectly as possible. So from my perfectionist perspective, it's not, there's room for improvement. But the meaning of the verses is conveyed correctly in our translation, just not as accurately as I would like.
How would you say it compares to the others that are available?
Well, Professor Swaminathan's, he tried to translate it in English verse. Always when you try to translate in to English verse, into verse, you're setting unnecessary limitations on yourself. You cannot express the ideas so accurately when you translate into poetry. Secondly, though he was using Sadhu Om's Tamil commentary for most of his translation, there were places where he was translating when Sadhu Om was writing the commentary and sending to him so that he could translate. Sometimes because of delays, Sadhu Om wasn't able to send him and he had to translate without the help of Sadhu Om's Tamil prose rendering, and often he got it wrong. So his translation is in many cases not entirely accurate. David Godman and well, it wasn't David Godman. David Godman doesn't know Tamil. It was Venkata Subramaniam's translation, edited by David. For many of the verses, for a few hundred verses, Murugan has written a Tamil prose rendering. So where Murugan had written a Tamil prose rendering, they have translated that. So often their translation, which is an expansion of what's in the verse, but unfortunately there were 3 notebooks in which there were commentaries that people took as being Murugana's, I mean, not commentaries, prose renderings, but the 3rd notebook, though some of the meanings may have been explanations given by Murugana, they were not actually written by Murugana, and many of them are wrong. So in places they followed a wrong meaning, taking it to be Murugana's meaning. So I don't know how many, I haven't gone through it carefully, but I mean, on the whole, their translation is okay, but in many cases, it is a translation not of the verse, but of Murugana's explanatory paraphrase of the verse.
And then like 1,000 verses went missing on a bus or something, I heard?
On a train, yes.
On a train.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah. Murugana tried to compose some of the ones that were lost. But he said when he tried to do so, he found his memory was very miserly. It was ready to part with only very little of the 1,000 verses.
Okay, so how do you go from sort of the dreamlike state to Bhagavan himself? Like, what is that transition for us who are stuck in Maya to go from everything is a dream, I am a dreamer, this is just dream, I need to wake up? What is that leap that I need to make to reach Uḷḷada? That is just the annihilation of the ego?
Bhagavan said, go back the way you came. What is the way we came? We came by rising as ego. So that is, what is the, now we are in this world of Maya. What is the doorway through which we came in order to enter this world of Maya? That same doorway we must go back. That doorway is ego. As Bhagavan says in verse 24 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, the body doesn't say I. In other words, the body is not aware of itself as I. The Satchit doesn't rise, but in between, one thing called I rises as the extent of the body. That one thing called I is ego. So that is the link between the body and the world of forms and Satchit. So if we want to return to Satchit, it is only through ego that we can return to Satchit, because among all the things that we are now aware of, all these phenomena, we're not aware of I am in any of them. We're aware of I am only in ourself. That is, it is only ego that is aware of itself as I am, and also aware of other things. Why is ego aware of other things? As Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, we dealt with the first 3. I said from verse 4, Bhagavan really begins to get down to the nitty-gritty of his philosophy. And he begins by explaining how the world appears. That is, he says, Uruvam tānayin ulhu paramatram. If oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. So why does the world appear as multiple forms? Because we take ourselves to be this form. If we didn't experience ourselves as a form, we couldn't experience forms. That's why he says in the next sentence of that verse, if oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? So it's only when we experience ourselves as a form, but we experience other forms. So, but all these worlds of names and forms, the world doesn't mean only the external world, also the internal world of all our thoughts and feelings and everything. All these are, when we say internal, external, that's a different sense we're using internal, external there. That is, when we talk about thoughts being internal, it's a different sense, because when Bhagavan says that we must turn back within, he doesn't mean we turn back towards the thought, we turn back towards ego. So what is, so it's only relatively inside and outside, but Bhagavan does sometimes distinguish. For example, in verse 6 of Arunachala, he talks about worlds inside and outside. That is the world of physical phenomena and the world of mental phenomena. So all these appear only because we have taken ourselves to be this body. If we don't take ourselves to be this body, we won't be aware of any other forms. So the root problem is ego. So it's only through ego, that is through ego, but we've come out, and it's through ego, but we must go back. So ego is the link, that is the knot, the Uḷḷadu Granthi. So to separate that link, if we cut that link, so it's only by all, ego is a mixture of the fundamental awareness I am and a form, the form of 5 sheaths, this called body. So the ego cannot exist except by grasping this body as I. So if we want to eradicate ego, we need to separate ourselves from these 5 sheaths. How to separate ourselves? Only by clinging to I. Every day when we fall asleep, we separate ourselves from them. But that's so we separate ourselves from them because of tiredness. We're too tired to continue projecting, so we subside out of tiredness. Because we subside, and then we experience, and then what remains is pure awareness. That pure awareness doesn't destroy ego, because ego has already subsided, it's absent there. So while ego is alive and kicking, we as ego need to experience pure awareness. Ego can never experience pure awareness, but when ego tries to experience pure awareness, when it sees what it actually is, when it sees it is actually pure awareness, it ceases to be ego. That is how the annihilation of ego is brought about.
I like how you've been discussing Spirana, by the way. I never quite understood that from the text. You were making it very clear.
I had written that long ago in articles in my blog, but I think many people, there's too much in my blog. I write too much, that's the trouble. I'm too much of a chatterbox.
No, that's perfectly fine. I prefer to watch your videos for some reason, and to talk with you, but
I think many people do. And I must say, for me, it's much easier talking than writing. I mean, I like writing because when we write, we can be very precise. But I mean, often, well, sometimes when I editing videos or I listen to bits that I've said, I find, oh, I said something there, but wasn't what I meant. But I hope people understand what I meant. Sometimes I get, for example, I get snake and rope muddled up, or I get sleep or dream muddled up sometimes, but it should be clear from the context what I mean.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh, are you going to be writing a commentary on Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu or Nānar? I thought you said you might publish something like that.
My blog is more or less a commentary supplemented by my videos, but I don't have time for writing any. I mean, there's so much demands of my time. I don't have time to sit down and write a commentary as such.
Would it be beneficial if someone came along and gave you like a lot of money to do something? Would that be make it so you'd have more time, or is that irrelevant to your work?
Money doesn't give me time. If I had a lot of money, if someone comes and gives me $1 million, then I've got a problem. What to do with this $1 million? Clinging on to it is not good. So I mean, I have a problem to whom to give it, whether I should give to this person or this person. So Bhagavan gives me just enough to meet my needs. That is best.
I was curious because I think I've heard Butler or Godman. I thought I heard at one point that someone sort of funded some of their translations. So I was just curious.
What I need is time, and I don't have time, because that all the time I have is taken up by, I get so many emails, and in so many ways there are demands of my time, and just living life takes time. How the days pass, one day after another, and so many things that I think I would like to do, but there just isn't time for it. The days are passing by. One day this body is going to be carried away by time.
I hope that's not anytime soon.
Who knows? In the grander scale of things, it's very soon. Our life in this world is a very, very fleeting. We're here one moment, gone the next.
Now you draw a good distinction between Bhagavan as what is and Bhagavan as the body. And you even said that Sadhu Om said that when he was in the body, it was a subtle Maya, because we were taking him as objective rather than as what he really is, which is our true nature.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? I think that's very interesting, because you even have made a distinction between Ramana and Bhagavan. Like those are two separate entities.
So long as that is when Bhagavan was there physically, Sadhu Om said, for example, when he composed songs, his natural inclination was he wanted to go and sing his song in front of Bhagavan. And he would be satisfied when he did so. But then he would laugh at himself. From where is this song coming, if not from Bhagavan? But thinking, I have composed this song, I want to sing to Bhagavan, that is the subtle Maya. So like that, so long as we take Bhagavan, so long as Bhagavan is there in physical form, it's very easy to get to limit Bhagavan to that form. Whereas Bhagavan is the unlimited whole. And Bhagavan is present at every time and at every place, because he's always shining in our heart as eye. When Perumal Swami lost one of his court cases against the ashram, and he came to Bhagavan and he said, you have defeated me in this court, but I will not leave you. I'll take you to the higher court. I'll take you to the highest court there is. Even if you're God as you claim to be, what can you do? You can put me in hell, but I will not leave you. Bhagavan said, even if you go to hell, I will not leave you. Because how can Bhagavan leave? Bhagavan, all those souls who are burning in hell, Bhagavan is in the heart of each one of them as I. Because without I, how can they be suffering in hell? So Bhagavan can never leave us. The problem is we leave Bhagavan by coming outwards. We need to stop leaving Bhagavan by turning back within. Then hell itself will become heaven.
In the Eastern Orthodox Christian view, they do think that hell is still the presence of God, but because we're sort of refusing God, it burns rather than is blissful.
Yeah.
You do have a
God is omnipresent. So how can there be any place where God is not?
There's a
because
couple
God is that in which all these things appear.
There's a couple other things you say that coincide with what they say. It's just interesting to me that these sort of deep, long-standing traditions have correspondences. It's interesting to me. So one thing is, like you say, we need to cooperate with Bhagavan's grace, with God's grace. That's there too. It's not just like, it's always there. You have to cooperate with it.
Yeah, we have to yield ourselves to it.
Yield ourselves to it. Okay, that's a little bit different. I thought I heard you say cooperate.
No, well, it amounts to the same. That is, grace is always drawing our mind inwards. But we have to yield ourselves to that. We have to, that amounts to cooperate. We have to, because of our inclination to go outwards, if we follow our inclination to go outwards, then we are not yielding, we're not cooperating. If instead of yielding to our inclination to go outwards, we yield to our inclination to go within, then we are yielding to grace or cooperating with grace. It amounts to the same thing.
Okay. There was something else that you said that struck me as very similar to, and then I've heard that if they stick to their diet, they're vegan half of the year. And then also I heard that they view in paradise, in the Garden of Eden, humans, Adam and Eve, were vegetarian.
Yeah, I think, even in Christianity, there were traditions of vegetarianism, I think, but not so, it wasn't such a dominant tradition, I think. I think some orders of monks were vegetarian or pescatarian, or though I don't think pescatarian's really any better than being, I mean, it's another form of being a carnivore.
I have a friend who's a carnivore. They see it as like a diet that's like really beneficial for the body. and he's like trying to persuade me not to practice veganism because he thinks it's unhealthy.
Okay, well, let us be healthy, but have a clear conscience. Sorry, let us be unhealthy with a clear conscience, but healthy with an unclear conscience. If what they say is correct, but it's not actually correct. But
Yeah.
and also health, ill health, all these things are according to destiny. So let us do. Is our health so important that we should cause suffering to other creatures? Obviously not. So we should, it's the only ethical option is to be vegan in the context of the modern day world.
So Bhagavan is Atma Swarupa.
Yes. He is nothing but that. Bhagavan used to say, Jnana me jnani. Jnana alone is the jnani. Jnana means pure awareness. Only pure awareness knows pure awareness.
That makes sense. A long time ago, I said to you, don't jnanis, like, for example, Muruganar and Sadhguru, don't they talk to one another? And your immediate response was, there is only one.
But in our view, because we see the nature of ego is to see many. So we see many jnanas. But those many are only one. As Bhagavan says in verse 13 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Jnanamam tane me, oneself who is jnana, pure awareness, alone is real. Nānavam jnanam ajnanamam, knowledge of multiplicity is ignorance. But even that ignorance, which is unreal, doesn't exist apart from oneself, who is jnana, which alone is real.
You want to talk more about this idea that all is God? I was emailing with someone and I said that you made this point in our talk with Metropolitan Callistos. You said, God is everything, but everything is not God. Do you want to clarify that statement a little bit more?
I don't think I said God is everything. God is God is everything in the sense that God is the only thing.
Right.
There is no thing other than God.
There's nothing other
because
than
God is the infinite whole. So how can anything be other than the infinite? If there were anything other than God, God would thereby be limited. So I don't think any theist will tell you God is limited. But if well, I don't know, maybe there are some, but I mean, it seems to me an illogical stance to take, to say God is anything but infinite. If God is infinite, how can there be anything separate from him?
Yeah, there are views like God is outside of the world, the creation and the creator are separate, and he's outside of time and we're in time. I don't know.
Then he's a very limited God.
Yeah. I don't even think that's the standard view. I've heard like evangelicals talk like that, but like if you look at Metropolitan Callistos, it's like the Holy Spirit is present and filling all things, everywhere present and filling all things.
I think the Catholic Church teaches that God is the fullness of being.
There you go, yeah.
That's just another way of saying the infinite whole.
Yeah.
So nothing can be other than God. If he's the fullness of being, there cannot be anything other than him.
They would say we're sort of sharing in his wholeness because we're dependent and he's independent.
This is bhēdābhēda, differences in non-difference. Oh yeah, I was going to say about these differences in non-difference. Bhagavan used to say, when asked about this bhēdābhēda, difference in non-difference and difference, Bhagavan said, if there's difference, it's not non-difference. If there's non-difference, there's no differences. To explain this, when you say things are different, you're saying they're not identical. When you say they're non-different, you're saying they're identical. But identical can be used in two senses. That is, nowadays, so many things are mass-produced. T-shirts are mass-produced, shoes are mass-produced, cars are mass-produced, technology is mass-produced. So if you have two t-shirts that came off the same production line at the same time, they're identical in quality. They have the same color, the same size, the same shape, everything, same pattern and everything on them. So that is qualitative identity. But they are two different things. If you're talking about qualitative identity, then there's scope for difference and non-difference. That is, if you have two cars, I don't know, some models of cars, what are they called? Lamborghini and Rolls-Royce. You have a Lamborghini and a Rolls-Royce. In some respects, they're the same. They both have four wheels. They've got a steering wheel. They've got an engine. So in some respect, they're non-different. In other respects, they're different because one is a Rolls-Royce and one is a Lamborghini. So each have their own individual features. So when you're talking about qualitative difference, there's scope for both difference and non-difference to exist side by side. But if you're talking about numerical identity, if something is numerically identical, then there are not two things, there's only one thing. So when it is said, but we are one, we and God are one, it's talking about numerical identity. And then there's, if two things are numerically identical, there cannot be any scope for any difference. Because if there's any difference, that how can one thing be different to itself? Differences, but then how is it that we seem to be different from God? What is different is not the substance, as Bhagavan says very beautifully in verse 24 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. Irukam ekayal isa jivagal oru porale aba undipara upadi unave verundipara. That is, by existing nature, God and soul are one substance, are only one substance. So in their existing nature, what is their existing nature? It's what he described in the previous verse, Uḷḷadu and Uṇñuvu. What is an awareness? That is what we actually are is just awareness. As that pure awareness, we and God are one. So where lies the differences? The difference lies in our upadi uṇñuvu, in our awareness of differences, the different of adjuncts. Because we now identify ourselves as I am this person, I am Michael. Obviously, as Michael, I seem to be something separate from God. Michael is not the infinite whole. God is the infinite whole. So there seems to be a separation, but in substance, they're one. So there is no actual difference. That's why Advaita says all differences are vivarta. They're all appearance. They're not real.
On the other hand,
the truth is only a bhēdā. There are no differences. All differences are mere appearances. Whereas the viśiṣṭādvaitins and the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they think they give reality to the differences, which Advaita denies. Advaita accepts that there's the appearance of differences, but the differences are only seeming. They're not real differences.
On the other hand, though, you often talk, I am Michael, but then there's what I really am. So I know you're doing that for our benefit, or at least it seems to me, but then it sounds like you're saying there's two eyes, because really there's just Bhagavan. No,
there's one eye. One eye, when that one eye remains as it is, without adjuncts, that is what we really are. When that one eye seems to be mixed with adjuncts, that is ego. Mixed here means conflated. That is, as ego, we're not only mixed with this body, it is my actual experience, I am this body. I am sitting here. So ego is that knot, that Uḷḷadu Granthi is such a tight knot, but we actually experience this body as I. But at the same time, we're able to see this body is an object known by us. I am a subject, this body is an object. So how can I be this object? There's a flaw in our experience of ourselves. But our experience is, at present, our experience is, I am this body. So this is such a deeply rooted knot. To get rid of it, we need to go very deep within. We need to investigate ourselves very, very keenly. Only by clinging to I am can we separate ourselves from everything that we are not.
Can you talk about the difference?
And when we separate ourselves from everything we are not, we find I am alone exists. And what appeared as everything is nothing other than I am.
Can you talk
just
about
like what appeared as a snake is nothing but a rope?
Can you talk about the difference between the monkey that clings to the mother monkey and then the kitten that is carried by the mother kitten, the mother cat?
Right. These are two analogies that are often used for different styles of devotion. Bhagavan, some people think we have a choice. Either we can be like a kitten or we can be like a monkey. Bhagavan said, no, it's not so. Those who have devotion of kitten type are those who for many lives have been clinging firmly to God in monkey style. That is the analogy is, I'll just explain the analogy. That is, the baby monkey will cling to its mother. It has to hold on tight. When the mother is jumping from tree to tree, the baby monkey has to hold on tight. Whereas the kitten will just lie there going meow, meow, meow. And the mother comes and picks it up by the scruff of its neck and carries it. So in the early stages of devotion, we have to cling firmly. In fact, our job is only clinging. Finally, when our devotion matures to such an extent that we finally yield ourselves to God, then he picks us up, like as a mother cat picks up the kitten and takes us to our destination. So we eventually reach our goal like kittens. But until then, we have to cling like the baby monkey.